Hello learners, this is Jalpa. Today we are going to learn figures of speech. Let's see what are they and why they are used. Now, figures of speech are like decorations on words. We need them to make our poetry look beautiful. Figures of speech are generally used for poetry, but it's also used for literature, like prose literature. Now, let's see this. There are two sentences which you can see, and let's read both of them. Suddenly I saw many yellow daffodils, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Both the sentences mean the same, but we can understand that the first one is actually a sentence, while the second one is a verse. We can understand that because the first one is very direct. We can understand that it's taken from a paragraph, any random paragraph, maybe about daffodils, and the second one is taken from a poem. Now the second one is not very direct. It's woven with words very properly to give that feeling of poetry. Now this is what we call a poetry verse, and it's used in poetries so that it's used with a lot of figures of speech so that it can beautify it. Now let's learn the first figure of speech. It's repetition. You can understand from the name itself that it's used for things when it's used for verses when we want to repeat a particular word. Now let's read the first one. Today as never before, the fates of men are so intimately linked to one another that a disaster for one is a disaster for everybody. Now the word disaster is repeated. You can see that. The poet could have used some other word, but he chose to repeat disaster for effect. Now figures of speech makes it easier for us to sing poems. That's why they are used. Let's look at the second example. The boy was a good footballer because his father was a footballer and his grandfather was a footballer. Here, this might not be a poetry verse, but it's used for a little comic effect. And again, we have used the word footballer again and again, and this is a very good example of repetition. The word footballer, it's being repeated. That's why we call it repetition. The next one. The bird said, I don't sing because I'm happy. I'm happy because I sing. Now, sing is repeated. Besides that, I am happy is repeated. Now, this is again a very good example of repetition. The words sing and the words I am happy are repeated again and again, and that's why it makes a very good example for repetition. Let's look at the next figure of speech, which is alliteration. It's a type of repetition. Now, please remember that there are many types of repetition. There are other figures of speech which fall under the category of repetition. You'll see why. Now, let's look at the first example to understand this better. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Now, this is a tongue twister. It's not actually taken from a poem, but here you can see that the sound per is being repeated again and again. Per, Peter, per, Piper, per, picked, per, and so on. Now, the sound of per is being repeated again and again, and that too in a series. It's consistently going on. There are actually no gaps, and this is why we call it alliteration. You can remember alliteration by remembering these two L's in the spelling, but nevertheless, this is how it goes on. Now it's not actually about the letter, it's more about the sound. You'll see that in the next examples, but this one now, for let's take this for an example. Black bug bit a big black bear. The sound b is being repeated again and again. That's why we can say that alliteration has been used, but here the letter is also being repeated. Let's see the next one. Sheep should sleep in a shed, but here the sounds which are repeated are she, sh, should, sh, shed, sh. That means the sh sound is being repeated. This is called alliteration. Let's take a look at the next one. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary. Now here You can see that here WH is being used, here only W's are used. That doesn't matter because the sound is still were. While, were, weak, were, very, were. That's why it's alliteration. The next example, the captain kept the most of his fielders within the circle. Now you must be wondering that captain starts with a C and K, your kept starts with a K, but that doesn't matter because the sound is still K. The captain, captain, kept, again kept is being used. That's the point, and that's why it's alliteration, because we focus on sounds, not on letters. Please remember, we focus on sounds when we are talking about alliteration, not on the letters. Let's see the next one. This is anaphora. It's another type of repetition, and let's see why I've written beginning over here. Every day, every night, in every way, I'm getting better and better. Now you'll see that there is one word which is being repeated again and again, and that too in the beginning. Every day, every night, in every way. It's being repeated in the beginning. Now this is why I've written beginning over here. When a word is being repeated in the beginning of a clause, it's anaphora. It's a type of repetition. Even if you say it's repetition, it's fine, but to be more specific, we call it anaphora. The next example, buying diapers for the baby, feeding the baby, playing with the baby. This is what your life is when you have a baby. Now this is actually a wrong example of anaphora, and I've just placed it so that I can explain why it cannot be used. The baby, the baby, the baby, all this is at the end. That's why we do not call it anaphora. Let's look at another example. My life is my purpose, my life is my goal, my life is my inspiration. Now, my life, it's at the beginning of every sentence. That's why it's anaphora. Now you can remember anaphora like this. Anaphora, the word starts with an A is in the beginning. You can use it any way you like, but I like to remember it that way. So please remember, anaphora is for the beginning, and it's used whenever you use the same word again and again in the beginning of several clauses which are put together for effect. Let's look at the next one. It's epiphora, or we can call it epistrophe. There are two names and both are okay for the same figure of speech. It's a type of repetition and it's the opposite of anaphora. Here we focus on the endings more. I want pizza, he wants pizza, we all want pizza. Now pizza, the word pizza is being used at the end of these clauses, and this is how we understand epiphora or epistrophe. When words are repeated at the end of clauses, it's epiphora or epistrophe. The next one, the sky was bright, her smile was bright, my heart was bright, 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 bright. It's used at the end of each sentence. That's why it's epiphora. The next one is where now, who now, when now. Now, all used at the end. Again, it's epiphora. The next one is simile. It's not simile, and it's used for comparisons when you want to compare something to something. But just remember, as and like are very important when simile is considered. We focus on these two words whenever we are talking about simile. If you see them, it's simile without a doubt. Don't worry about anything else then. If you see as or like used for comparison, it is simile without a doubt. Now our soldiers are as brave as lions. As no problem here, it's simile. Her cheeks are red like a rose. Like, again, simile. We are comparing her cheeks to roses, and like is used, it is simile. He is as funny as a monkey. We are comparing him to a monkey because he is funny, and as is used, simile. The laborer remained busy at work all day long and slept like a log that night. Now, Here again we are using like, which means we are comparing the laborer to a log, and this shows that it's simile because like is used. The next one is metaphor. People often get confused between simile and metaphor because they both are used for comparisons, but it's very easy to remember simile because all you have to remember is as and like. Whenever you see them, it's simile. But here for metaphor, we compare people or their things or their attributes without using as and like. My brother was boiling mad doesn't mean the brother was actually some form of liquid which was boiling, but his anger was so bad that he looked boiling mad. That means he was very angry. Here, boiling mad is just a metaphor for his anger. The assignment was a breeze. That doesn't mean the assignment was something which can be compared to air or wind. The assignment was a breeze means it was very easy. Breeze is being used as a metaphor over here. It is going to be clear skies from now on. Clear skies, that means there are not going to be any problems from now on. So clear skies are used as a metaphor for no problems. Now the skies of his future began to darken. The skies of his future began to darken. Now future is not something which has skies, but here skies and darken are just used to say that his future was not looking very good. His future was not bringing him a lot of good luck. The skies of his future began to darken means his future was beginning to look bad. Her voice is music to his ears. Now if somebody says that, it means her voice used to bring a lot of happiness to him. That's why we are using music for as a metaphor for her voice, but it doesn't mean that she always used to sing. It just means that her voice was very appealing to him. He used to become happy when he used to listen to. Now let's see the difference between these three figures of speech. Alliteration, anaphora, epiphora are all forms of repetition. They are types of repetition, but let's see how they are different. Let us look at the first example. A sheep should sleep in a shed. Now we have already understood that the sound, we always concentrate on sounds when we are talking about alliteration, not on words. The sound sh, sh, sh is being repeated again and again. That's what makes it a very good example of alliteration. Anaphora, anaphora, a, beginning. We are talking about anaphora, and when we talk about anaphora, we are focusing on words, and we are focusing on my life over here. It's being used again and again, and I mean twice, but in the beginning. Anaphora is always for words which are repeated in the beginning. Please remember that. Epiphora. Now here the words pizza, or I should say the word pizza, is being repeated again and again, but at the end of each clause. Epiphora is also for repetition, but words which are repeated at the end of each clause. Let's see another example. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. The sound p, p, p are being repeated. The next one is every day, every night, in every way. Here there are no sounds, there are words which are being repeated. Every, and they are in the beginning of each clause. After the comma, directly. After the comma, let's say after in, but still it's in the beginning, not at the end. So it makes it an example of anaphora. The sky was bright, her smile was bright. Now the sky was bright, bright at the end. Her smile was bright, bright again at the end. So it becomes epiphora because the words are at the end of each sentence. Black bug bit a big black bear. B, 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 because the sound b is being repeated, the sound, not the words. That's why it's alliteration. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. Your hair is, now your, all this is in the beginning, and this is why it's anaphora. Both of them are in the beginning. That's what makes it anaphora. Epiphora. Now, where now is placed at the end of each question. That's why it's epiphora. Let's look at the difference between simile and metaphor. Both are used for comparisons, but we remember that simile is always used with as and like. Whenever you use as and like, and whenever you see as and like in the verse, it is simile. If as and like are used for comparisons, if as and like are not used, but still a comparison is being made, it's a metaphor. Let's look at the first example. Our soldiers are as brave as lions. Without a doubt, it's simile because as is being used. Our soldiers were brave like lions. We are comparing soldiers to lions because they were brave. My brother was boiling mad doesn't mean his brother was in liquid form, but boiling mad means his brother's anger was really very dangerous. But here, no as and like is used, so it's metaphor. Her cheeks are red like a rose, like, without a doubt, it's a simile. Her voice is music to his ears. Voice is being compared to music, but no as in like, that means it's a metaphor. The young athlete looked as strong as an ox, as simile. Here, war is the mother of all battles. Now, here, war is called the mother of all battles because you engage in a war, you fight battles. Battles are always parts of wars which are not actually cold wars. Now here we can understand that war is being compared to a mother of all battles, actually the mother of all battles, but the comparison is not made by using as or like. That means this is an example of a metaphor. Now it's time for a quick quiz. There will be a timer for you. Let's see how many you can answer. I have given you some verses and some sentences. Now let's see how many of you can understand which sentence or which verse is written using which particular figure of speech. You just have to read the sentence, think of a figure of speech which I've taught you just now, whichever comes to your mind first, and remember your answers. You can check them at the end of the quiz. And your time starts now. Time up. Let's look at the first example. Dan's dog dove deep in the dam drinking dirty water. The sound "d" is being repeated. It's alliteration. Your dress like the tube, you eat like the tube. The word tube, actually the words the tube, are being repeated. It's a form of repetition, so if your answer is repetition, it's okay, but they are at the end. That's epiphora or epistrophe or repetition. The next one. His words are pearls of wisdom. His words are compared with pearls. Now, the comparison is being made without using as or like. That makes it a metaphor. The orator said, "Good morning to the old, good morning to the young, good morning to each and everyone present." Good morning. These words are used at the beginning of each clause. Beginning, that makes it anaphora or repetition. Laughter is the best medicine. Laughter is the best medicine. Now, laughter is being compared to a medicine. It's obviously not a medicine. Let's see the answer. That's metaphor because the comparison is made without using as and like. She's safe just like I promised. She's all set to marry Norrington just like she promised. Now, this was said by Jack Sparrow. This is, let's see, first of all, what is being repeated over here. She, promised. The answer is epiphora or epistrophe, or you can also call it repetition, because the words are repeated, but they are repeated randomly. That's why it's repetition. And you can also say that because of the word promised, it's epiphora or epistrophe. It cannot be anaphora because she is not being repeated properly. Like in the first two clauses, I should say, she is in the beginning, but in the last clause, it's at the end. That's why it's not a very good example of anaphora. The last clause spoiled it, we can say that. So it's epiphora. He is as cunning as a fox. That's easy. That's make it that the word as makes it a simile, because the comparison is made. His cunningness is compared to the cunningness of a fox, and it's using as. A good cook could cook as much cookies as a good cook who could cook cookies. Now, the sounds are repeated. That's why it's alliteration. You can also call it an example of repetition, because the words cook are being used again and again. Now, find two examples for each figure of speech which I've taught you today from your textbooks, and see how much you can guess and how much you have understood. I'm sure you have understood it all, and you can find examples very easily. They can be from poems, they can even be from lessons. Thank you. See you next time.